Welcome to the Gamer Base. This is ConArtist, and today we're doing Rome 2, the sequel to Rome Total War and the latest in the Total War franchise. Now, a lot's been changed this time around. There's a lot of revamps to a lot of the mechanics, so I'm just going to go through them here in this video. Now, for those of you who don't play the series, the Total War series is basically a mixture between a turn-based campaign mode and real-time battles, and basically the changes you make in the campaign mode affect the battles directly and vice versa. So Rome 2 has a much bigger scope than Shogun. Shogun only took place in Japan, but Rome kind of takes place almost around the entire world. So you get literally hundreds of unique units for each faction. So you can see here I'm playing as Egypt, so I get the Nubian bowmen, which, and if I zoom in on them, you can see they all have kind of unique faces, they all have different skin tones, and this is the same for all the units, you know. The elephants have made a comeback as well, which is great.
More elephants!
Now, if you look right here on the bottom of the panel, there are the abilities have been revamped. At first, in the older games, you kind of maybe had 2 abilities per unit, like the archers, for example, would be able to have fire arrows. Here, though, that's all been kind of changed a bit, and it's much bigger. So you see here, there are about 6 special abilities on the bar here. Now, if I look at the special unit, the Thorax Swordsman, now they're kind of lined up for a charge. But if I click on this ability, Shield Wall, what's going to happen is they're going to form a wall right in front, and that's going to help block out arrows. This is use the whip. If I expand the toolbar here, it says that it's going to exert them, but it's going to increase their melee attack and weapon damage and stuff like that. Now, a big complaint about this game, and I have to share in this complaint, is the frame rates and the general usability of it. Right out of the box, Rome 2 is probably not going to run too well on your system, really regardless of what hardware you have. I mean, if you go online and see the forums, a lot of people have really good rigs, and they're just having a lot of trouble with the frame rates. I was running Shogun 2 on extreme graphics. Everything was ramped up to the max, and I was getting a 60 frames per second frame rate. On this game, no such luck. You'll have a lot of stuttering, a lot of slowdown. It really just hasn't been optimized for a wide range of computers. Now, obviously, Creative Assembly are going to release a lot of patches and stuff to deal with these problems, but it's just a little disappointing that they couldn't have done a little more work right out of the box so that people who bought it on day one wouldn't have these issues. Now, this here is the meat of the game. It's the campaign map, and this is where all your decisions are going to take place. Taxes, unit development, deployment, research, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you remember the beginning of the series, way back when Shogun came out, the campaign map was basically just a very simple way for you to arrange your units and maybe use a few spies here and there, but it was kind of just setting a context for the battles. As years have gone on, though, and especially in this installment, it's kind of turned into a mini civilization. Things have gone very complex. There's a lot of different building types and a lot of decisions you have to make, and you can really lose out in battles purely based on the decisions you make in the campaign map. Another big change Creative Assembly have done, and they've really been trying to make things more tactical and less about making kind of a stack of death with your units, is that you have to attach units to a general. Units can't just kind of walk on their own. If you remember in the older games, if you had a unit, a kind of temporary captain would be set up, and you just let him take care of things. But in this one, every single unit has to be controlled by a general. The general's seen here, and if the general dies, the entire unit gets wiped out with him. Now, it's a bit of a strange mechanic, but it really does kind of work, because what the game's trying to tell you is don't just overstock on units, kind of take care of each unit you recruit, because each unit is going to take away from your overall income. So you no longer recruit armies directly from towns. What you can do from towns is raise a force, which basically means you're recruiting a specific general, and then from that general's panel, which is seen right here, you can recruit extra units, and the units get attached to that general. So it's much more based on the personality of the general himself, which has also gone into in-depth. So for example, if I click on the general unit right here, I can click on his traits, and it's going to give me what I've researched already. And I haven't researched much because this is a new general, but he has kind of his own stats, his own abilities, his own attributes, and they level up with you. He has a retinue, people who kind of increase skills for him. He has traits. It's just really, really in-depth. Construction's also gone a lot more in-depth, so if you can see here, there's a really limited amount of space for you to build different buildings, and they do cost you a lot of money. So you kind of have to make a lot of difficult decisions about which building you're going to place next. Each building falls into a skill tree. So if you look here, buildings kind of stack up on top of one another based on the skill tree, which you can see with the handy encyclopedia which comes with the game. The encyclopedia has all the information you'll need, so for newcomers, there's a pretty steep learning curve early on, but you kind of start to pick it up as you go along. So it is taking a lot of elements and mechanics from Civilization. It's kind of trying to make it a more streamlined 4X pure strategy game as opposed to making you rely on battles more. Now, the idea of smaller settlements kind of joining up to build a province is relatively new, and it changes a lot of things, because, for example, if I were to take over both of these settlements, which I do, which makes up the entire region, I can now issue an edict, for example, and these edicts give you different abilities, like, for example, up to 5% on your tax rate, or 10% wealth from all commerce on buildings, and it kind of becomes a mini objective to take all the different settlements you can. And the difficulty comes from the fact that each settlement can be controlled by a different faction. If you can see here, I control the capital of this region, of this province, sorry, but each of these different cities, if I just click on them, it goes straight to the cities, is controlled by a different faction. So if I want to really get the best I can out of this faction and have all the decisions I make affect the faction as a whole, these settlements as a whole, it's going to require a lot of work. But it does give you a nice short-term objective, which was kind of lacking in the older games. Another thing that's making this game more of a grand strategy game than anything else, or kind of a mini grand strategy game, is that the inclusion of also a tech tree. Now, the tech tree existed in Shogun, but there were 2 branches and they were kind of limited. Now it's been expanded a bit. I mean, it's still nowhere near as big as, for example, Civ 5's tech tree, but it's pretty robust. It covers a lot of different gameplay options, so it's split up into military and civil technologies. So military technology is exactly what it sounds like. You can invest in your cavalry, invest in your infantry. There's a whole tree just for siege weapons where you can invest in artillery and ladders and all kinds of stuff like that. The civil tree can be for the more pacifist player. It concerns things like growth and food and agriculture, but most likely you'll just be using it to raise money to make an army, so it's kind of a short-term thing. Now, as you can see, the campaign maps is pretty massive. I mean, it covers almost the entire world, from Africa to Asia to Europe. It's the provinces and the regions are divided up really well, and it gives you a nice short-term objective. If you want, because what the game's encouraging you to do is to take over the provinces by taking over the smaller settlements that are within it. So it gives you a nice sense of a short-term goal, which was kind of missing from the older games, because you'd essentially just be conquering one province after another and kind of making your own way through, and it didn't feel like you had a cohesive plan that the game was kind of egging you on in. So this is one of the better additions to the game, especially to the campaign map, is this idea of having bigger regions which are broken down into smaller settlements. Another cool addition is the idea of stances. Now, your army doesn't just walk around normally anymore. Your army can choose a specific stance which it wants to take. Now, if you want to gain a lot of ground, for example, you could choose the forced march stance, which means you can initiate battle, and you can't get any new units, and you're going to be 50% more susceptible to an ambush, but you will be able to move twice the distance in the same turn. So this is great if you want to cover some ground really quickly and don't really care about the morale of your men. One of the stances, for example, is the ambush stance. Now, this is great if you know your enemy's coming for you. What you can do is you can hide in a forest, and now you won't be able to move, as it says there in the red, but what you will get is an extra set of fireballs, and you'll get 50% chance to discover agents, and it's great to get the drop on your enemy with this stance. Now, diplomacy is essentially the same. Nothing's really been revamped too much. What you get is a quick overview of what the faction thinks of you and why they think that of you. So here you can see these guys are neutral towards me, but they have a cultural aversion because they're of a different type of German, apparently. Now, the diplomacy options aren't as robust as, say, Europa Universalis, but they're alright. I mean, you can do your usual stuff, military alliances, you can declare war, non-aggression pacts, you can make trade agreements, although you don't actually see what you're trading or how you can increase the trading. It just kind of happens. So a lot of things have been automated. So even though the game's kind of taking this approach towards being more grand strategy-like, there's still a lot of things which are on the simple side, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it just feels like they're improving kind of one step at a time, as opposed to overhauling the entire system to kind of fit in within the framework that they want to achieve. Now, since this game is just so huge, you have a lot of really useful toolbars here which keep track of all the things that are going on. Now, I don't have much going on, but you get the general idea. This is showing me all my units which I have on the map, including agents. This shows all the provinces that I've discovered so far, including the ones that belong to me, and this shows me all the factions that I've encountered. And this is a really good way to keep tabs on everything that's going on in case you lose track. From here also, it's a nice quick shortcut to diplomacy, so I can get at a glance here that, for example, these guys don't like me too much because I declared war on them. But if I double click on their name, it'll take me straight to the diplomacy panel, and I could maybe super peace if I wanted to, but I'm not, because I don't want to. And he's being kind of rude. He's telling me he's going to feed me to the dogs, so I'm not going to make peace. Now, another big complaint, which I have to agree with, is the turn times. And this has always been kind of a problem for the Total War series, but since this game has just become so overloaded with features, it really takes a while for everyone to complete their turns, and there are so many factions that by the time the AI processes their turns, you could be sitting there for quite a while waiting for your turn to come up in the game. Now, a huge addition to the game, which was very advertised, is the idea of coastal battles. Now, before we had land battles, then naval battles were added, so it only makes sense to combine both in really big coastal battles, which can be seen here. And the way it works is you switch between your naval units and your land units. So your land units will kind of be adjacent to the enemy land units, and the same applies to your ships. So if I start the battle here, you can see the enemy ships deploy over there, and the enemy troops deploy over there. So you're essentially fighting a battle on two fronts, which is a really interesting tactical choice. Now, one thing you can do, which adds a very interesting level of depth and strategy, is you can actually dock your ships, and the land units which are on board them can come off and join your land units over here. Now, this kind of puts you at risk at losing the naval battle. Naval battles, unfortunately, are kind of a victim of history because cannons weren't really invented at the time this game is set. So one of your main strategies is getting a boat full of archers near an enemy boat and firing at them, getting a boat full of kind of swordsmen and boarding an enemy ship, or just ramming it until it sinks. Now, this is great and everything, but it kind of feels like a step back due to no fault of Creative Assembly, but it kind of does feel a step back from the battles of Empire, which were kind of exactly what you'd expect from really great naval battles. One of my favorite changes to the game so far has been the idea of line of sight. Now, in previous Total War games, you could see all your enemy's units from the get-go, unless they happen to be hidden in like a tree or something. But now that's kind of changed, because what you need to do is go and scout for enemy units yourself. You can't just see them straight from the beginning. So right now my units are hidden, as seen by the eye icon over them and the eye icon here on their cards. Which means the enemy can't see them. Now, as they get closer, they will eventually see them, and actually, this unit is not hidden at all, so I've not done a very good job there. Now, this adds a whole new layer of depth, because you can basically trick your enemy into thinking that your forces are concentrated in a certain place, and they can send units out there, only to be ambushed by units which are hidden. So there are a few things that break up line of sight. So, for example, this hill here is hiding these units. You can see the eye icon over here, because these enemy units can't see them. If there are trees nearby, you could also take shelter in them. They'd also kind of shield you from missile attacks. So the real-time battles come together really well in this game. I mean, it's all the previous ideas and mechanics of the rest of the series, and they've all just kind of been mushed up into this game and just works really well. A pretty big problem here is the AI. Now, they're not, to put it mildly, the sharpest tool in the shed. They'll do just really strange things that just completely lose the battle for them. They'll funnel themselves down very narrow corridors and let your archers pick them off. They'll kind of just stand there while you shoot at them. They really don't use the full capacity of their army the way you think they would. So the AI will probably be fixed in patching, but I mean, that's kind of one of the main problems with this game, is it just wasn't ready for release yet. I mean, it's still a great game and you can completely see the potential here, but really just a couple of more months to just polish up the AI, to polish up the compatibility with systems and boost the frame rates a little bit, would have really done wonders for it. So it's kind of a shame that it was released in this state and that we have to wait for a couple of weeks before it's actually fully playable. So to sum up, if any of this seems interesting to you, then you should definitely pick this up. I'm having a blast with it. I mean, the few drawbacks aside, it's really not enough to you know, make you not want to buy this game. The main changes here are really kind of indicative of Creative Assembly trying to merge the battle and the campaign part of the game together, because usually I mean, in the previous installments they've been kind of kept in separate compartments, but now they're kind of merged together because the decisions are really affected on both sides of it. So regardless of whether you come in as kind of a more turn-based strategy fan like A La Civilization, or if you're more into the battle stuff, I think you'll find a lot to like here. And the slow motion's back, which is excellent. Is one of my favorite feature about the game is you can just slow down the action and just kind of become your own film director. It's great. There's a cinematic mode, which, you know, it's great. Well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you got an idea of what this game is like. This has been ConArtist with the Gamer Base. Thanks for watching. Rate, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.